Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a comparison between the Samsung Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition on the left and the Asus Transformer Pad TF701 on the right. So these are both 10.1-inch Android tablets running Jelly Bean version 4.3. That's out of the box for the Samsung, updated for the Transformer as of November 18th. And both of these are really top-tier tablets. Both have fantastic quad-core processors. With the Samsung, you actually have an Octa environment. There are two quad-core processors, but for the purposes of comparison, we are looking at an Exynos 5 chip in there. That's Samsung's very own A15 processor, and it really does fly. It's a beast of a chip. It benchmarks top of the class, as does the Tegra 4 quad-core processor found in the Transformer TF701. However, when it comes to gaming performance, yes, you do have Tegra enhanced gaming with the NVIDIA chipset, but overall benchmarking results are going to be in favor of Samsung's gaming capability. So that's something I want to get out there in advance for people who are interested in which will outperform the other when it comes to gaming overall, especially in terms of 3D performance as well. And even though that may seem like a strange thing, when you're spending this much on a tablet, many users out there really do want to be able to get the most they can out of something that's very close to being a full-blown computer while still being a mobile device. Beyond that, before I continue to dive into specifications, let's talk about pricing, because that's really where things get interesting. The Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition starts out at $550, and that gets you 16 gigs of internal storage. Right now, we're not looking at the TouchWiz UI. This is Nova Launcher. You can try it out for free or choose to purchase it. On the right-hand side, we're looking at a $450 32 gig device. Very smooth out of the box. I do not have to run any sort of launcher there. That's a matter of personal preference regarding the Samsung. Some people love the TouchWiz environment from using it on their Samsung Galaxy phones, and that's really the idea behind the Galaxy lineup of tablets, much like Apple's iPad and iPhone system. Samsung adhering to the same ecosystem of making customers happy throughout their entire mobile computing needs. Asus, on the other hand, going for a much more stock Nexus-like environment, but adding all of the productivity things that the Nexus environment is missing. Expandable storage, things that the Samsung tablet also has, but a whole lot more with the keyboard mobile dock experience. But $450 gets you the internal storage that $600 or $600 is demanded with Samsung, because that's the price of their 32 gigabyte Wi-Fi model. So $550 versus $450, literally a $100 difference separating these two tablets at the 32 gigabyte internal storage capacity. Beyond that, in terms of memory, you've got 3 gigs of RAM in the Samsung, which is unmatched in the entire tablet industry right now, and then more of the standard 2 gigs of RAM, which you'll find in basically every other device other than the Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition. In terms of the actual screens, 2560 by 1600 resolution on both. Since they are the exact same size, 10.1 inches, you are looking at the same pixel density. When it comes to the actual panel types, I can tell you right now that there's no question that the Samsung, in my opinion, is the better performer, but it is the better performer by a marginal amount. So in terms of the $100 price difference between these two tablets, if you're going to equate that with screen, I really wouldn't. It's more about which experience you're going for, which I'll get to a little bit later. But both displays are brilliant. Best in class when compared to just about anything else. I'm going to say these are the two best displays out there, because the Asus employs the exact same type of IPS panel as the latest generation iPad, but it has even more resolution, which arguably makes it better for all sorts of things, whether we're talking about reading or just general media consumption, video playback, looking at photographs. The Note, on the other hand, has a clear type panel, which in my opinion, is a little bit sharper, color accuracy a little bit better, and things are just more vivid. And if you look at any of my videos, demonstrations, including what I'll be doing a little bit later here with some web browsing tests, I think you'll see side by side that the Note is just a little bit brighter and gives a little bit more when it comes to that wow factor from these really high-res screens, which arguably I don't think you need more than 1080p, but of course manufacturers, ever since iPad went above and beyond that, have just been stretching it. And 2560 by 1600 has become the new standard. Whether or not these A15 chips are really capable of dealing with them is another question entirely. And that's where a lot of the lag comes from that people complain about, whether they understand it or not. Of course, the iPad does not run at this high resolution. That offsets things. I'm not going to really get into that. But focusing here, so I've mentioned the processor, the screen resolution, as well as performance, and also other things that are noteworthy. Bluetooth. In the Samsung tablet, we have Bluetooth 4.0. In the Asus, we're looking at 3.0. Both of these have GPS, and as far as I've tested them so far, absolutely no problems with GPS. So if you're worried about Asus, because in the past we all know what happened with the very first Transformer, the Prime, and having to send out GPS kits, those days are long gone. Everything works perfectly well here, and so no issues with that. But the big feature that the Samsung has, and arguably is why it's $100 more out of the box, has a lot to do with its form factor. As you can see, a lot more bezel here on the Transformer, and that's because, quite frankly, it's got to accommodate its keyboard dock, which allows it to transform into a clamshell computing device. The Note, on the other hand, is purely a tablet at heart, but its key defining feature is the S Pen. And I'm going to focus on the Note now for a little bit. We'll come back to the Transformer, don't worry. And really, this experience is all about the S Pen. If you don't care about having a stylus, then I will, at this point, say you don't really need to watch any more of this review, because even though the Note is the lighter tablet of the two, has a better screen, in my opinion, better cameras, something I haven't mentioned in the comparison thus far, and also they're very close in battery life. The fact remains that for $100 in difference, I'm going to always recommend the Asus as long as you get one that isn't defective out of the box. And that applies to both, by the way. Samsung is far from being problem-free. No manufacturer is perfect when it comes to quality control. You can always find a dead pixel or backlight bleed or dust under the screen, no matter who the manufacturer is, because quite frankly, all of these products are pretty much made in the same place, except this tablet, the Note, is now being made in Vietnam. So that's an exception, not made in China. I'm not commenting on whether that's better or worse. But back to the S Pen. If you want the S Pen, on the other hand, if you're looking for a stylus, a tablet that really won't give you fatigue with one-hand use, which is what the iPad Air is marketing completely, the Note 10.1 2014 edition accomplishes that. Air Command is the big new marketing feature. I've demoed this, whether you use action memos, which allow you to actually tie activities to the memos you're taking. So if you write down a phone number, you can then tie that to a contact. If you write down an address, you can then tie that to a contact. There are so many different things you can do with this beyond just a typical memo of days past. And it'll open up with applications. I've demoed this before. It's really a great application. It goes above and beyond just simple note-taking. So Samsung has completely evolved what started out as just, again, stylus integration and turned it into a completely different way of using your tablet. So this is a productivity machine, but a completely different approach from the traditional keyboard clamshell approach that Asus has focused on with the Transformer. No keyboard dock is designed for this as of yet. Of course, you can use any Bluetooth dock. Will work with this, keyboard I mean, not dock, as well as a mouse. That applies for both tablets. You don't have to buy the keyboard dock for the Asus, but I highly recommend it. Otherwise, after all, it's really not much of a Transformer. But again, back to the pen functions. The pen window just allows you to multitask to your heart's content. All the hand holding, I've shown this before, I leave it on just so it's demonstrated whenever I do this. Basically, you just draw a square on screen, and wherever you draw that, it's going to let you select from these applications and then open that respective application in that area. You can move it around, open up even more multitasking with the multi-window capability. And this is where Samsung really has, in my opinion, shown that despite whatever complaints you could have about TouchWiz, their software ends up being value-oriented. So you can open up the gallery, email, music, whatever you want. You can just select it, S-Note. It's really great, and this is a multitasking beast, no question about it. There are other features here I'm not going to really dive too far into them. But the whole point is that if you want scrapbooking capability where you're just going to capture things while you're web browsing and then go ahead and save them to the internal storage so that you can share them, organize them, that's what this is all about. So this really does take the traditional stylus experience to a whole nother level. As I mentioned before, the cameras are also really good on this tablet. 2 megapixel front facing, 8 megapixel rear. Before I put it down, I want to take a look at the back. In terms of the build quality, all plastic here. It is the lighter tablet. You're looking at about a 10% difference in weight, and that is really significant. As I said, for one-handed use, this is going to be far more palatable than the Asus. In fact, it's going to make the Transformer seem somewhat like a brick. The 8 megapixel rear camera is in a different class than the 5 megapixel rear shooter on the Asus. Of course, no pen on the Asus, but the build quality here, even though it's an improvement from Samsung's previous generations, less of a fingerprint magnet than a high finish gloss plastic. This faux leather stitch isn't a personal favorite of mine, but it's certainly more subdued and speaks to a more, in my opinion, quality look than previous generations. I could do without the fake metal bezel that runs along the side of it. It really doesn't add to the quality, but it doesn't really take away from it either. The stereo speakers are relatively strong on this tablet. That's something where it does outclass the Transformer, which has a single speaker. Micro SD card slot for storage expansion, and of course that infrared blaster so that this can be used as a universal remote control. Something that the Transformer cannot do, but that's not something necessarily that most tablet users are in the market for. No need for proprietary charging. You can see we've got a micro USB port down there, so you can charge this with just about any micro USB cable. So that's another nice thing about the Galaxy Note. I'm not saying it in any way justifies price point, but certainly an advantage. Battery life, as I mentioned before, roughly the same as the Transformer. You're looking at around 10 hours. This is definitely going to get you through a full day of use. It's also going to take a full day, well, I really mean overnight, to charge it. 6 hours to charge. It's a long charge, no question, but you got to keep in mind there is a huge battery under the hood. Hard buttons on the front screen, back, home, as well as the menu button settings. And these are actually good in my opinion because they don't eat into screen real estate. As you can see here on the Transformer, they do. So that's a matter of personal preference. Overall, that's pretty much a solid rundown of what the Samsung Galaxy Note has to offer. So it's really all about that stylus. You do have another quad-core processor in here that's an A7-based chip that's for low-power processes, really to, maintain battery life. And how effective it is, I can't speak to it, but I can tell you that battery life is great. So again, this is a very strong performer, arguably the most powerful tablet on the market based on paper specifications. The reports of lag that have been out there, I know what they are stemming from. I really believe it has to do mostly with TouchWiz, and again, the fact that A15 chips are still, I won't say struggling, but it's not easy for them to push the 2560 by 1600 resolution that both of these tablets sport. Of course, with the micro USB port, you can hook up all sorts of peripherals with an on-the-go cable. You can also use Bluetooth, as I mentioned before. So really a great tablet so far, like everything that Samsung's put together with their software in terms of added software out of the box. A pretty good package. Yes, some people will argue that there's a lot of bloat, but things like Polaris Office 5, the Sketchbook for Galaxy, those are things you want. Evernote. This really turns this into something that a student or a professional alike can actually use as a productivity machine. And the multitasking with multi-view and the pen window feature really just turn this into a whole different device that no matter what you try to download from the App Store to replace this sort of functionality, you're never going to get this sort of integration. So again, it's a matter of personal preference. Do you need the stylus experience? If you do, Samsung just kicks everyone else out of the park. They're great at what they've done here. This is really the best of Samsung finally brought in the form of a tablet, and I think they've done a wonderful job. The one area they could improve on is quality control. I've done a video on it, but for the most part, I think it's a relatively solid tablet, even at its lofty price point. Now let's take a look and talk about the Asus. Here, a lot more bezel, no question about it. I mentioned before, 10% lighter here with the Samsung. And the fact that this also has aluminum on the back end really does lend to, in my opinion, more of a quality feel, but that quality feel comes with clearly more weight. So at about a pound and a quarter, which isn't crazy by any means for a tablet, it's still pretty much run-of-the-mill average weight for any tablet out there, except for the iPad Air or the Galaxy Note 10.1 in this 10-inch class. The tablet really overall doesn't get too heavy, but I think for people that are going to continuously compare it to the Note, which is what this video is about, it certainly is the heavier of the two. And while it may seem very subtle at only 10%, that subtlety becomes very apparent very quickly when you are using this. But still, weight not really an issue to me. That's why I can still easily recommend this tablet even without the keyboard mobile dock. But I do recommend picking that up because, as I mentioned earlier in the video, that's what the Transformer is all about. That's why it's called the Transformer to begin with. In terms of battery life, Asus has quoted 13 hours of battery life for this tablet. I've been seeing well over 10. So depending on how you actually push the Tegra 4 in here, you probably can get somewhere between 10 and 12 hours, which is definitely best in class, better than the Note. But the Note does have a bit of a brighter screen and definitely, I think, a little bit more of a power-hungry processor. That's one of the reasons that it does have that secondary processor. But focusing on the Transformer, in terms of whether or not, as I mentioned, you're going to be a fan of the bezel, I personally think some people with larger hands are going to like the extra bezel. It's going to be more accommodating for holding it, whereas even though the Note has an attractive look with the narrow bezel, some people will find it a little bit more difficult to hold on to, especially to avoid hitting the physical buttons while using it in portrait. Not that either of these is ideal for portrait, since they are widescreen format tablets that are really all about viewing movies, but do have incredibly high resolution screens that are optimized for reading text. So don't for a moment think that either of these can't be used in bright light outdoors. They both have great screens specifically for that function. But the bezel, again, love or hate relationship. I think it's personally a fine feature, and again, it accommodates the keyboard dock, which Asus has to focus on. It's the calling card of this device. In terms of the actual RAM, the 2 gigs of RAM versus the 3, really no performance difference that I can perceive. In fact, out of the box, this tablet is smoother than the Note 10.1, and at $100 less, that's one of the very first reasons I can tell all of you I can recommend this as just a tablet alone, as I just said earlier, without the dock. Because to be this smooth, whether you want to attribute that to the Tegra 4 or the fact that this is just a lighter build of software, the overlay, as I mentioned, more stock, more vanilla, Nexus-like than what we get with Samsung, whatever it may be, it's done right. It is still customized. You know, this doesn't look exactly like a Nexus environment, but in terms of the overlay, things are relatively light. It looks just like Nova Launcher, which you may have noticed, and that's why I'm also showing this on Nova, because that's really more of the fair comparison here, because once Nova's thrown on the Note, all of that lag that has to do with TouchWiz is completely gone. But overall, the performance has been great. The screen on here is fantastic. I mentioned before, the edge does go to the Note on the screen quality, but really, this is better than the current iPad. That should tell you everything that you need to know. That just means that the Samsung is the best on the market. That doesn't in any way take a thing away from the fact that Asus has made a tremendous upgrade on this screen when compared with the TF700 and every other tablet on the market. So again, the screen quality, in my opinion, goes to the Note 10 2014, but the Transformer is number 2 in the market right now, and that's a very close number 2. And to some people's eyes, this may even be better. So go ahead and take a look. It also has a outdoor brightness mode. You can see I just switched it to that they called it a power save mode, but that's your outdoor mode, which used to be a super brightness mode. And it doesn't get as bright as the Note. It's still incredibly bright, but just not as bright. In terms of color accuracy, very sharp, and overall, I'm pleased with everything that I've seen. Again, just in that direct comparison, the Note does outperform it. I'll reiterate, though, over and over again, it's so close that if you're wondering if it's worth the price difference, it's not. That's the first thing I would say about the difference in these two 2560 by 1600 resolution displays. In terms of stock software offerings, this is not as feature-rich as the Galaxy Note 10.1. In fact, the Galaxy Note 10.1 comes with a whole host of things from $25 to Google Play credit, to 50 Samsung Hub credit, to free subscriptions. This tablet, that isn't the pitch. The pitch here is about functionality. This is for those of you who are looking for an Ultrabook replacement, or really just one of the most powerful tablets in the market at the most affordable price possible. And that's what it delivers on. The front camera, 1.2 megapixels, really nothing special. 5 megapixels on the rear is solid, but does not compete with the 8 megapixel camera on the Galaxy Note. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Samsung, is a force in the smartphone industry, and they make a tremendous amount of cameras now as well. That's a market they're picking up in. Asus, not so much. There really isn't a presence there. But cameras, never really a focus for me, but I know a lot of you out there do love to use cameras on tablets. That's why I'm mentioning it. But overall, again, not a lot of software on here stock, and that's because Asus is pointing to really trying to let you shape your experience. They're just pointing you in a direction of productivity. But included, they do have their own web browser, and I will be in a moment showing you some side-by-side performance. Beyond that, Supernote, which is critical for productivity within their own ecosystem here. That's their offering, their answer to Samsung's own Note application. And you can use a stylus with a device like this. You just aren't getting a Wacom digitizer experience. So that's a big pro for the Galaxy Note. But in terms of performance, this smokes everything else out there. I mean, the only tablet it does not smoke is the Note. But as I keep mentioning, when it comes to lag out of the box, this is a smoother device. You won't have to do any tweaking to get it to operate the way it should. And I'm not saying that that it requires that tweaking, but for people who are really critical, and maybe really critical isn't exactly the accurate definition, but for those of you that really can't stand seeing any sort of lag whatsoever, you are going to have to tweak it. Here, you're really not going to have to do anything. And it's just a matter, I guess, of the heft of the overlay. But multiple user accounts are here on both. Access to all of the typical Google services are here on both of them. But in terms of what you get here, a different package entirely. Micro SD card slot. You do have an HDMI out, micro HDMI out port here, so you do actually have video out. You're not going to have to rely just on Miracast, which both of these tablets support because both of them do have dual band Wi-Fi capability. Your volume rocker right here, power button, that rear camera, which also, by the way, lacks an LED flash, something that the Galaxy Note also has in its favor. But I do really like the build quality here. This is not new, as I mentioned in previous videos on this, as well as coverage of the TF700. The aluminum spun finish backing is a nice touch. The gray color here is a matter of personal preference, but I do think that this is a nice looking tablet, and it really does feel more solid and well built than the Galaxy Note because of this aluminum backing. In the same vein as I mentioned earlier, it's also heavier as a result. You've also got that wider bezel. Single speaker, pretty loud on output, but unfortunately, I really would have liked to have seen Asus rectify this and throw two speakers on this device. This is the only premium tablet on the market other than the Fruit product to sport, a single speaker. And when I say that, Apple's made strides as well, but it's really unacceptable to me to buy such a high-end tablet and then only have a single speaker. It's just a little bit backwards. In terms of other things to note, on the bottom we've got, let me unlock the device there, our docking port and charging port, which is proprietary. This is a strike against the Transformer. Unfortunately, it's one of the very few things that I can really critique about this tablet, but also a necessary evil in order to dock it with its mobile dock. So it is what it is. Personally, I don't think it's a big deal, but I would have liked to have seen them include a micro USB port on this tablet for charging, independent of that proprietary port. They could sell us on the port for the dock and still have another way to charge. Unfortunately, that's not an enhancement that came with this update, but pretty much everything else about this tablet is a tremendous upgrade in my opinion. This is not just an incremental update. You're getting a better screen, better processor, better RAM, a better price point for 32 gigs of internal storage. Still no 64 gig offering here, but of course no 64 gig offering with the Samsung. But at least there are two options with Samsung right now. We've got a 16 and 32. Here, only 32 gigs currently being offered, at least stateside. Not that I've seen a 64 gig internationally as well. I think at one point there was a 64 gig floating around here in the States for a second at the beginning of the month, but I haven't seen it since. So overall, great battery life here, best in class. It does beat out the Note. And whether that's to do with the screen, TouchWiz, whatever it is, it just simply does a little bit better. Of course, no pen here, so if you need a stylus, you really shouldn't even be making this comparison. This is really more about which of these two heavyweights is right for you. And that's where now, I want to bring up the actual accessories, because I've covered accessories for both of these. With the Galaxy Note, you're looking at something like the actual book cover, which really is only going to give you just a sleep and wake function through magnetic shields in here. So when you open it up, it'll wake up the device. It gives you basic protection. It is made of plastic, much like the entire tablet. Replicates the entire fit and finish of that faux leather finish with the fake stitch around it. Has cutouts for everything, S Pen, all the ports, power button, volume rocker are not actually, it doesn't have cutouts for those, but speaker grills are accommodated, so you're not going to have any problems with that. But, in terms of functionality, it's really just a case with some kickstands and sleep and wake functions. When we're talking about the Transformer, that's where it redefines the entire market, because in comes the keyboard dock, the mobile dock, and you now have a full clamshell experience. It acts as a screen protector when it's docked, because clearly the screen is no longer front-facing and exposed to getting smacked, damaged, scratched. You've got almost a full-size keyboard, which I've reviewed already, and it works really well. Especially at its price point. An internal battery that's going to extend you by another 4 hours, keep your tablet battery topped off. All sorts of shortcut keys to control volume, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi functionality, search, home, everything that's always been there with Android and that the Transformers always had. This is completely constructed of plastic, but what's really important about it is that not a lot of flex, so even though it's plastic, it holds up. When docked, you're looking at 2.4 pounds, so up from that 1.25 and change. You charge not with an included cable with the actual keyboard dock, but with the one that came with the Transformer. Would like to see them actually include something, but they don't. LED right there for charging information to let you know when you're charging and charging has been completed. And then if we flip it around, we've got our full-size SD card slot, which is where the Transformer really, besides having a keyboard that extends battery life, it also has a full-size SD card slot, something you will not find on any other tablet in the market. And then also a full-size USB 3.0 port, something, again, you will not find on pretty much any other Android tablet on the market. So improvement in battery life, improvement in functionality with an almost full-size keyboard dock, with also a touchpad with multi-touch scrolling. That's pretty much it in the gestures department. And again, I would have liked to have seen a little bit better build quality on this, but if that's the step back that Asus had to take in order to end up delivering an overall value like this, I think that it's really a fantastic product, even where things are at right now. So it really comes down to whether or not you need the better cameras, need the S Pen, and don't care about having that keyboard productivity environment. The last thing I'm going to show, if you've made it through all 30 minutes, is some actual web browsing. Keep in mind, another thing that I've mentioned, having the physical buttons does free up screen real estate. That is, in my opinion, a big advantage for the Samsung. Does it justify the price difference? Absolutely not, but it is something noteworthy. Here we've got on-screen buttons like most Android devices these days, which some people, quite frankly, prefer. So it's all a matter of personal preference. But I want to get to some web browsing. Let me get the stock web browser up, because that's obviously how I want to actually compare these side by side. And I'm going to go ahead and just pull up CNN on both. We'll start off with that. Let's see if I can time it perfectly. And you can see really close. I mean, very, very close in terms of how quickly they actually respond. I'm going to try to do this as close as possible for all of you out there. Both of these, by the way, are cranked up to full brightness. If you've been monitoring battery life and you're going to complain or ask me how the batteries could perform the way they are, keep in mind brightness is completely all the way up. Pinch to zoom. Again, trying to time this as well as possible so that you can see clearly exactly how responsive each tablet is. And really, both of them are going to be best in class. That's why they're on the table. That's why I'm comparing them. As I mentioned before, I don't review every device on the market. That's because, quite frankly, in my opinion, every device does not deserve to be reviewed. These two represent best in breed of two completely different approaches to the tablet market. One, a hybrid trying to be the best of both worlds. The other, an identity all its own. Not to say that the Transformer isn't an identity all its own, but it is lending its entire functionality and form from a traditional Ultrabook, netbook market, whereas the Note experience really is a unique one that's different, that Samsung really has developed in a way that the Asus Transformer doesn't lend itself to. But the actual product overall, clearly, if you need a keyboard, you need the extra battery life, and require the full-size USB port and SD card slot that arguably make the Transformer more powerful than the Note, even though the Note may have slightly better hardware, that's the reason to really go with the Transformer. That's my best way of putting it. Another thing I've noticed is that when I browse to websites, let's say ESPN, for example, which again, I'll try to time it perfectly, the Asus tablet does default to desktop. In this case, this time the Samsung tablet did as well, but that's because I told it to. So that's something to point out. That's not an important difference by any means, but it's noteworthy. And in terms of actual text, this will be a good example of side-by-side text for you to compare. Fully zoomed in, again, both of these are 2560 by 1600 resolution displays. Brightness cranked all the way up. Let me zoom in so you can really get a look at that text for those of you who are pixel density freaks here and think that that's what it's all about. And really, you're not going to see any kind of resolution issues. You're not going to see pixels here. This is all about having as sharp a reading environment as you could possibly have. So these both make great e-reading devices, even though I don't think their form factor necessarily lends to the best e-reading form factor. I think an 8-inch tablet, 7-inch tablet is definitely a better alternative. The point is, their screen resolution is definitely leveraged incredibly well for an e-reading environment. Both have reading modes, by the way. I mean, Samsung started this a long time ago. We've got that reading mode. Again, that whole custom UI here, more of the stock UI look going on here, and we do have a reading mode as well with Asus, so which you can see right there. So very different UIs, and that's where even with Nova Launcher you could see TouchWiz rearing its head, but I don't think this is a bad thing. You know, having quick access to everything I don't see as any kind of loss. But web browsing, overall performance, very solid from both of these. The keyboards even are very similar. I will say that with the bezels, a little bit tough for me to get to the middle of the keyboard, something I don't have that problem with the Samsung. That's part of the trade-off with the difference in bezel size. And really, again, there is a tremendous difference in the size of these tablets, just a side-by-side here. So you can actually see, even though they're both 10.1-inch tablets, the Asus clearly taking on a considerable amount of size when compared to the Note. no question about it. But let's get back to the web browsing. I want to just take you to at least another website, little video playback. As I mentioned before, speaker output on this is far better on this being the Samsung, because you do have dual speakers and quality control on both of these, I have to say, despite reading negative feedback for both, which you'll find for any tablet, any product, frankly. Both of them fairly solid is what I would say. They have their equal share of issues, but I haven't seen any dead pixels or backlight bleed on any of these devices. Very little flex, if any, and that usually, those are the things we find most frequently with tablets. Those are just the general quality control issues. So I also wanted to just demonstrate video playback performance as well as speaker performance. Of course, the Transformer only has that single speaker, whereas we have two stereo speakers that are side mounted on the Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition. So I'm going to go ahead and play back one at a time. We'll go full screen on both. This is the YouTube app that I'm playing this back from. As you can see, as I mentioned before, we're losing a little bit of screen real estate on the Asus Transformer Pad TF701 because of the on-screen buttons. But let me go ahead and start playback, and you should also see a difference in the actual screens. This should demonstrate what I've been mentioning about the slight edge that the Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition has. So I'll start off with the Transformer. Pad mobile dock, priced at $139.99 and designed exclusively for the TF701 that I just recently unboxed as well as updated. Let's see what buffering is like. Improvement from the last generation, 10 times the speed essentially for those of you curious. And if you're using things like hard drive, or oversell them here. But the point is, unparalleled battery life, unparalleled functionality. You can see it's actually charging right now. It's charging the battery of the tablet. That's another active feature of the... Going to get the actual audio near the mic. When it's not being powered, the idea is that if you ever separate and undock the tablet, your battery is topped off. Another nice automatic feature. So that should have given you a good idea of the audio and video quality from the Transformer. Now let's focus on the Samsung and see how it actually performs. And today I wanted to share a quick unboxing and first look at the Asus Transformer Pad mobile dock, priced at $139.99 and designed exclusively for the TF701 that I just recently... Let's go ahead and skip ahead. That are really going to benefit because it's all about data transfer. Now, in terms of the keyboard, they have changed things up a little bit. About, of course, taking tablets to the next level. So let me go ahead and close this up, which is a Windows 8. So you may have noticed that there's absolutely no buffering with the Samsung, and I'll explain why. It's simply because this does have AC capability. I do have a router that is AC capable, and the speeds that I've been getting from the Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition are about double what I'm seeing out of the Transformer. Now, that's not to say that the Transformer won't be just as good as the Samsung for the average user out there, because you won't necessarily have a router to take advantage of the AC connectivity speeds that you're seeing right now, and the fact that there was zero buffering with the Note and you're seeing buffering with the Transformer. So keep that in mind. But if you do have an AC capable router, I can't stress enough that you're going to enjoy that extra speed with the Samsung tablet. You can see that again. It's very clear. That was the most buffering we got. A little bit more buffering there, but definitely quicker. Close there. Let me go ahead and just also demonstrate the audio. Get this in front of the microphone. Let me go ahead and actually dock it so that you guys can actually see what this looks like. I'm looking to see if there is a lock. There's a lock located right here. Audio performance is a little bit better. As I mentioned before, it's a little bit louder, a little bit clearer. The Asus tries to just blow things out because it's a single speaker. It's not bad. Samsung simply does better with the Note 10.1 2014 edition. So that little video test should have given you a good idea of what screen quality as well as audio performance are really like. And again, just to give you the same static image, which I think is relevant just to see that color contrast, how the whites are a little bit brighter on the Note 10.1. And again, that just speaks to the slight edge it has in screen competency. But overall, both of these tablets, incredibly powerful. Yes, you've got a little bit more RAM here, a little bit more gaming prowess, but the Transformer, when paired with the keyboard dock, really almost doubles as a computer legitimately. Battery life above and beyond anything in the industry. Full-size USB port, full-size SD card slot, which means that you're going to be able to hook up hard drives, peripherals, whatever you want, whereas here, you're going to have to use an on-the-go cable. It's not going to look as clean. So really, one is trying to replace a computer, the other a pen and paper, a pen and paper, but at the same time, a computer as well. So completely different approaches to productivity. Both are multitasking beasts. The 3 gigs of RAM is definitely in Samsung's favor here. The camera quality also in their favor, but battery life can't really come close to the Transformer, especially when paired with the mobile dock, nor can its overall functionality and productivity. No matter how much I can praise the S Pen, at the end of the day, a traditional keyboard that's going to give you more battery life as well as more capability to do just about anything, whether we're talking about work or play, is just inherently more valuable. And the fact that this pairing right here, the keyboard and actual tablet, ends up pricing out at roughly the exact same $600 price point for the same amount of internal storage space, with more capability in the Transformer to expand that because of the extra full-size SD card slot on the dock. The Transformer clearly a more compelling, more value, as well as the more versatile, capable machine. As a tablet alone, I'm clearly going to pick the Galaxy Note all day long, despite the fact that it's more expensive, because as a tablet itself, I think it is the better performer. But if you need something that can be both, the Transformer clearly unmatched in every single form and fashion. So both offer great performance, incredible screen quality, quality control that's relatively solid. You're not going to be disappointed for the most part. Be sure to purchase this from a reputable reseller with a clear return exchange policy so that you don't get stuck with something defective. And I think you'll be safe with either one. It really just comes down to whether you want pen input and just a tablet, the best tablet you can possibly buy, or you want the best tablet that can also transform into an Ultrabook replacement. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.